On Father's Day, my daughter slapped me. Not with her hand, but with her words. He called me Mom's ex-husband and referred to his stepfather as his real dad. 33 years of dedication collapsed in a single sentence. But later, a silent response from me would pierce her anger, bringing her to tears and forcing her to beg for forgiveness. Before I tell you what I said, please subscribe to the channel and share in the comments what time it is where you are right now. The knife stopped mid-cut when I heard his tone. I was chopping carrots for my evening soup, the rhythm of the knife hitting the chopping block filling my kitchen with a small homey music. The broth simmered behind me, releasing steam fragrant with thyme and chicken. It was a simple routine, one of the last solaces I had left. Then the phone rang. My shoulders tensed as soon as I saw the name on the screen. Agnes. Maybe it was the call she'd been waiting for. Maybe she wanted to talk like daughters are supposed to. "Hi, Dad," she said coldly. No warmth, no laughter. Just that cold, practiced indifference I'd learned to fear. "Look, I can come to your Father's Day thing, but not for long." I slowly lowered the knife. The steam rising from the pot behind me suddenly seemed to choke the air. "Of course, Agnes," I said, forcing cheerfulness into my voice as if repairing a cracked wall with paper. "I'd love to see you even for a little while." "Fine. Well, I'll probably drive there around noon on Sunday. But I can't stay past 3. I promised Mom and Eldon I'd help with their garden party." His words fell harder than any slap. A garden party with my ex-wife and her new husband took priority over Father's Day with me. I moved the spoon absent-mindedly, watching the carrots and onions swirl in slow circles. Even the wooden spoon seemed heavier in my hand. "That sounds lovely," I managed. "I was thinking of making that roast you used to love. Remember the herb-crusted one? Just don't do that 80s turkey," he said, laughing hollowly. "That was as dry as cardboard." His laugh sounded fake. I'd never made a turkey on Father's Day, not once. But correcting her would only open another wound. "Of course not," I said, swallowing the pain. "I'll do something special. Maybe we could find our way back through memories. I thought we could look at some old photos while you're here. I found those albums from when you were little." "Dad," he sighed, "I really can't stay long. 3 hours tops, and that's stretching it." 3 hours. After a year of missed calls, one-word texts, and silence, 3 hours was all it took. "Perfect," I lied. "We'll make the most of it." "Good. And Dad, try to keep things light, okay? I don't want to spend all my time talking about your problems, my problems, as if missing his father was just a burden he had to bear." I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and counted to 3 as my therapist taught me. "Of course," I said softly. "Just a nice relaxing afternoon." "Great, well I have to go. Eldon is calling me for dinner." At 7:30 on a Thursday she was having dinner with him, with them, with the man who had replaced me in everything that mattered. "Give my regards to your mother," I murmured. The words tasted bitter. "I will. See you on Sunday, Dad." The line cut off before I could say goodbye. I stood in the kitchen holding the silent phone, the soup still simmering, the carrots half cut on the cutting board. The edges had already begun to dry, abandoned, like so much of my life. 3 hours. After 33 years of raising her, loving her, protecting her, I got 3 hours. The knife felt heavier now as he lifted it, measuring each cut with the precision of an engineer, muscle memory from 4 decades in the trade. Some habits endure even when everything else falls apart. But tonight, I couldn't bring myself to finish. The vegetables could turn into puree. The soup didn't matter. What mattered was the pain in my chest. His voice, so casual, still echoing like a mockery. I crept into the living room, drawn by something I couldn't name. My fingers found the spine of an old photo album on the lower shelf. I pulled it out, kicking up dust like memories themselves. I opened it on Christmas 2019, our last real holiday together. Lula wearing the red sweater I'd bought her, Agnes with her arm around my shoulder, everyone smiling, radiant with the hope of permanence. That was before Eldon, before the company cast me out, as if I had never existed, before everything frayed, like a sweater that tears thread by thread. I thought of the divorce papers still lying on my desk, yellowed around the edges, stained with coffee from the day I signed them. My signature remained firm even as my life crumbled beneath it. 60 years old when they let me go. Too old to start over, too young to give up. 8 months of severance pay, that was it. 8 months of resumes disappearing into the void as my wife's patience evaporated. And now, my daughter, my own flesh and blood, was also running away. He started working late. Book club meetings that somehow stretched past midnight, phone calls in the other room. His voice lighter, almost youthful, a sound I hadn't heard in 32 years of marriage. Then came the confession. Eldon. A name that emptied me the moment he spoke it. He makes me feel like myself again, she said, as if 3 decades of shared life were erased in place of devotion. This, after I worked double shifts to put him through grad school. After celebrating every promotion, every victory, every step of their progress, but potential, that was a luxury we couldn't afford once I lost my job. I found myself flipping through old photos. Agnes at 10, with missing teeth, smiling next to the treehouse I had built for her. Agnes at 16, rolling her eyes at my dad jokes, but laughing anyway. Agnes at 25, calling for advice on her first serious job, her voice shining with confidence. When did that trust start to rust? It was slow, like metal that corrodes from within. Shorter calls, visits that became obligations. His words, once mine, now borrowed from Eldon, the successful businessman who had perfectly filled the void that my unemployment created. The coffee maker hissed in the kitchen, its mechanical comfort mocking me. For years I made coffee while my marriage fell apart. As my daughter's loyalty shifted, exchanged for stability, confidence, a future without question marks, I turned another page, his college years, graduation, his wide smile between us, my arm around her waist, Lula's hand in hers. Back then, we seemed unbreakable, a family carved out of permanence, but permanence was a myth. 2 years later, Lula remarried. 6 months later, Agnes started calling Eldon her bonus dad. The phrase hit me like a punch, as if parents were spare parts. Changed when the original broke. The legal documents arrived shortly, after custody arrangements for an adult daughter, as if love could be scheduled like a business meeting. Division of assets that left me with half of nothing, alimony. Requests that assumed he would eventually find another job. I didn't do it. The house became silent around me, a symphony of loneliness for a 60-year-old man. I spread the photographs on the coffee table like tarot cards, searching in their faces for a glimpse of my future. A photo stopped me. Agnes, 7 years old, ice cream smeared on his cheek like war paint, her little hand holding mine at the zoo. Her smile, full of gaps and purity, looking at me with a trust that was once absolute. That photo trembled in my hand. I remembered the day. Her gasp as the baby elephant trumpeted. His insistence on climbing on my shoulders to the car. You're my superhero, Dad, she whispered, her arms around my neck. The strongest man in the world. The strongest man. I almost laughed at the irony. At 12, he stood up for me against my classmates who made fun of my battered Honda. It's vintage, he told them. He has character. He had inherited my stubbornness, my refusal to give in when something mattered. High school brought kids. College brought decisions, but he still came to me first. Long nights in my workshop, shaping their dreams into plans. You always believe in me, Dad, he once said, even when I don't believe in myself. But that girl was gone. Now, Agnes at 28 comparing my advice with Eldon's. At 30, asking me for help with his down payment, but reminding me that Eldon had already contributed more. At 32, calling him more like a real father. That broke something in me. He had raised her since she was 2 years old. After Lula and I adopted her, I taught him to ride a bike. I attended all the school plays. I watched over every fever, every nightmare, every disappointment. 3 decades of love, erased in 3 short years by a man who bought his place, the home. Timer beeped from the kitchen. My soup was overcooked. I didn't move. I sat in the rubble of everything I thought was permanent. Eldon had resources I would never have. On vacations in Tuscany, country club parties, industry connections. Agnes celebrated with him, with me, home-cooked dinners, walks, silent constancy. But consistency is not a trend on social media. So I faded into the background, the opening act before the main event. And now, the only thing left for me was Sunday. 3 hours. 3 hours where he would sit at my table before rushing back towards him. I planned the meal with the desperation of a man running out of opportunities. Your favorites: garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, chocolate chip cookies. I polished the good dishes. I put 2 places like an optimist. Or a fool. 3 hours. To compress 33 years of parenthood in a memory that might endure. The grandfather clock struck, 10:30. I should sleep. But rest does not come to men who measure time and opportunities that are exhausted. I turned off the lamp. The photo of the zoo was still clutched in my hand. Upstairs, his old room awaited, intact, preserved, as if at any moment I could walk back in and call it home. But I wouldn't. And so I climbed the stairs slowly, sore knees, heart heavier than bone. 3 hours. 3 hours to prove that it still mattered. 3 hours to compete against a life of slow erosion. The weeds were easily pulled from the ground, but nothing could loosen the knot in my chest. His voice still echoed from yesterday's call. 3 hours. He had said it as a favor, like rationed medicine. But she arrived early. The Audi's silver paint gleamed in the sun, and for a moment, I was a father again, hopeful, unprepared. Then she stepped onto my porch, heels hitting the concrete like a sledgehammer, a blazer so sharp it could cut person hand. She didn't hug me. She didn't even lean back. "Dad, we need to talk." The charts hit the coffee table like artillery maps. Colorful graphs, confident projections, a future drawn in ink and certainty. I've built something incredible. A small business consultancy. Underserved markets, untapped potential. 6 figures in 18 months. His eyes shone with the fire I remembered from his childhood, the same fire that had once asked me to believe in his monsters under the bed. But now the monster was real, and it was written in 6 digits. I need $100,000. The words cracked the air like thunder. My coffee trembled in my hand. I set it down on the table before spilling it. She kept talking. Customer acquisition costs, profit margins, competitive advantage, but all I heard was the math of my life falling apart. $25,000. That was all I had. My savings, my security, my last defense against ruin, and yet he looked at me with the same confidence he had when he was 7, holding my hand at the zoo, ice cream on his cheek, calling me his superhero. How do you tell your daughter that Superman's cape has holes in it? I heard my own voice answering before I thought about it. I'll figure it out, honey. Her smile lit up the room. I knew you would. You always do, and just like that, I was trapped. He drove off, the Audi purring down the street, his dreams shimmering in the distance while I stood in the ruins of my reality. Back in my office, I counted and counted. Savings, pension, cash in the safe. 25,000. A life of discipline, sacrifice, survival, and it wasn't even a quarter of what I needed. The numbers flashed on the screen like a sentence, $100,000. She still believed she could move mountains, but I was just a man looking at bank statements, wondering how much a soul could be worth when love demanded a price no father should have to pay. Even $1,000 had once seemed like a fortune, worthy of gratitude, long phone calls, the kind of thanks that made sleepless nights feel lighter. But that was before Eldon, before she tasted what real money could do. I stared at the landline, hesitating. Who could I call? Old colleagues scattered. Neighbors caught up in their own lives. Family, everyone was too busy. My safe contained more than money, property deeds, insurance policies, my father's will, but even combined it wasn't enough. The coffee was cold, a brown ring staining the wood. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly toward 5 p.m., each second mocking me, reminding me, Sunday. 3 hours. I needed a miracle in less than 72 hours. I wrote the numbers, $100,000. Needed, $25,000 available, $75,000. Difference. The difference seemed impossible on paper, and in my chest it felt even worse. Saturday morning arrived with relentless clarity. Strong coffee, nerves on edge, I made every contact possible. At 9 a.m., I was at First National Bank. Documents clutched like shields. The young loan officer's skepticism permeated the room. Unsecured loans of this magnitude, without consistent employment income. Extremely difficult, I had expected it. Still, it stung like a blow. Home equity lines of credit, 3 weeks? 3 weeks too long. Time was a luxury I didn't have. Then Jerry, old friend, former colleague. 15 years of shared triumphs, all scattered by layoffs and distance. 2,000, that was all I could offer. My ocean of need filled with teaspoons. Mike, my college roommate, best man at my wedding. 1,000. But 2 weeks to release the funds. Too late, the clock was ticking. The pressure was mounting. Antique shop. Lula's jewelry, my father's antique watches. The wedding china. Sale potential, maybe 5,000. Instant cash. Closer to 3,000. Memories wrapped in china and pearls. Impossible to appraise. Back home, the evening light streaming through the car windows. Calculator in hand, adding up again. Every scenario fell short. Personal savings, $25,000. Contributions from friends, $7,000. Antique sales, $3,000 if I was lucky. Maximum potential, $35,000. $65,000 missing. My entrance had never seemed more like a dead end. Even $37,000 in potential sales couldn't close the gap. $63,000 was still missing. I could liquidate everything, call in every favor, sell all my possessions, and still fail him. I walked slowly toward the front door, the weight of the impossible pressing on my chest. The business plan lay on the coffee table, graphs and projections assuming her father could perform miracles. Miracles required resources I didn't have. Sleepless rehearsals filled the night. How to tell Agnes I couldn't give her the money. I'd carved the turkey, set the table for 2, arranged my best china. All arranged to soften the blow of failure. The doorbell rang at noon. I wiped my hands with the towel, forced a smile, and opened the door. 3 figures. Agnes in the center, beaming, flanked by Lula and Eldon. My hand gripped the frame as the carefully prepared day fell apart. Surprise. Dad, I brought Mom and Eldon cold water. My heart stumbled. Lula avoided my gaze. Eldon examined my house with the confidence of a man claiming territory. Hello, Winfred, Lula crooned, every word straining with enthusiasm. Interesting place. Very cozy, Eldon added, settling into my chair, moving my lamp, touching my books as if they belonged to him. Agnes twirled around the room. Isn't it perfect? Our whole family gathered for Father's Day. The words hit deeper than expected. His family, not mine. Lula sat on the edge of the sofa, her bag clutched like armor. Your father has made this place very nice, very comfortable, conforming. Nothing extraordinary. I ran to the kitchen, recalculating. The turkey would be good if I sliced it thinly. Barely enough vegetables. My intimate meal turned into an impromptu dinner. Do you need help there? Agnes called a no-no. Everything's under control, I lied. Nothing was under control. Through the kitchen door, Eldon examined my bookshelf with the precision of an appraiser, moved my lamp, and claimed the spot by the window. Lula made conversation about streets she hadn't driven on in years. Agnes jumped between them like a translator at a diplomatic summit. Her laughter filled the room, but it wasn't for me. I carried drinks on a creaking tray, my hands shaking, feeling the subtle displacement of my own home. Smells of turkey, wine, dishes, my day, my plans, my dignity, taken by the unexpected authority of another man. And yet Agnes remained radiant, believing in this new arrangement, oblivious to the silent erosion of her father's world, everyone except the host. The dining room is this way, I announced, pointing toward the door. Everything should be ready. They passed by one. Agnes grabbed my arm, squeezing lightly. Thanks for being so nice about this, Dad. I know surprises aren't really your thing, but I thought it would be wonderful to have everyone together. Wonderful. For whom, I wanted to ask, but his radiant satisfaction made it impossible to speak. I could only nod, following my unwanted guest toward what had become the most important meal of my life. The dining room, set up for 2, looked pathetic in front of the 4. I hurriedly added extra utensils as they settled in, and the table began to feel more like a tribunal than a family gathering. Eldon claimed the head of the table, my place, without a word. Agnes slid in beside him. Lula took the opposite chair, and I, the end of my own table, an observer in my own house. Hierarchy established before grace, before conversation. I learned years ago, never challenge Eldon's comfort. Outside, I turned to face her. Inside, Lula's voice drifted through the open kitchen window, politely commenting on my flower beds. Eldon's deeper tones echoed in response, already establishing his authority. "Why did you bring them here, Agnes?" I asked quietly. She crossed her arms, the teenage gesture she knew all too well. "Eldon wanted to see your house. Mom, too. This was supposed to be our day, our time together. 3 hours. That was all I had." "I thought it would be better," she said, chin raised, defiantly practiced, more meaningful. "Like a real family reunion instead of just obligation. The word hung between us like smoke. I walked deeper into the garden, away from the windows where they could hear us. Agnes followed me, her heels tapping softly against the stones of the path she had laid 5 years ago. "Did you plan this?" I asked, although the answer was clear. "Eldon thought it would be nice for us all to spend time together. You know, blended family togetherness. Blended family, another phrase erasing my unique importance in his life." "What did you tell them about our conversation yesterday? About your business plans?" He looked toward the house. "Nothing yet. I wanted today to go well first. You know how Mom gets with business talk?" Relief immediately followed by fear. The conversation was still coming, soon with an audience. "We can talk about that later." "Dad, right now I just want everyone to get along," he said, checking his watch. A glint of expensive metal I didn't recognize. "Besides, there's plenty of time to work out the details." Work out the details, as if my inability were just a scheduling conflict. A laugh floated from inside. Eldon, amused by something he couldn't hear. Agnes smiled automatically. "He's really trying, you know. This isn't easy for him either." "His what?" "My home, my family, territory I'd already claimed." "I appreciate the effort," I lied. "Next time a little warning would help." "There won't be a next time if today goes wrong," he warned sharply. "I'm trying to build something here, Dad. Something that works for everyone. But that requires flexibility on all sides, all the parts. I was simply a participant in my own life. Having your whole family here for Father's Day. Isn't that what fathers want? Children surrounded by people who love them. People who love them." The category now included Eldon. Through the window I saw him examining my kitchen cabinets, opening doors. Lula stood nearby, caught between intervening and avoiding conflict. He mapped my domestic territory like a general inspecting occupied lands. "Your phone's ringing," Agnes said, pointing at my pocket. 3 missed calls from Jerry. I should have answered. "Don't be long," he called over his shoulder as we approached the house. "Lunch is getting cold and Eldon doesn't like cold food. Eldon doesn't like cold food." My preferences were secondary. My day hijacked. My dignity suspended, and yet she remained radiant, determined to make this arrangement work. Oblivious to the silent dismantling of her father's world. Sometimes you have to adapt to new family dynamics. That's how life evolves. Life evolves. Mine had evolved from being a father to a supporting cast member in my daughter's sprawling family drama. The inner voices grew louder as we approached the door. Eldon presided over the scene, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being heard. Lula laughed at appropriate moments, a trained apprentice for this performance. I was about to discover how far my evolution had progressed. Agnes walked through the back door, cheerful and confident. "Lunch is ready, everyone," she said. I followed, noticing how easily she had assumed the role of co-hostess in my own home. Eldon stood up from examining my spice rack. Lula carefully replaced a photograph of Agnes's graduation on the counter. Her expression inscrutable. The dining room, set up for 2, now felt incredibly small for 4. Cramped. The mismatched chairs screamed my bachelor inadequacy. Eldon claimed the head chair, my chair, without hesitation. Agnes slid in next to him. Lula at the front, me at the end of my own table. "This looks delicious, Winfred," Lula offered, forced brightness coating her words. "You always knew how to prepare a turkey." "The turkey is a little dry, but not bad for home-cooked food," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. Eldon's fork dissected the meat with surgical precision. "Most people overcook it. Easy mistake without the proper equipment." I forced a smile, pouring cranberry sauce with hands that felt like shaking. "I'm doing fine. 5 years of practice." "Funny how you manage such a large house alone," Eldon continued, his appraising eyes scanning the dining room. "Maintenance must be a challenge." "The house isn't that big," I said carefully. Just enough for one person. He gestured vaguely at the ceiling molding, probably estimating square footage. Economic efficiency suggests something more compact. Agnes laughed. Eldon always thinks about optimization. It's what makes him so successful in business. Successful in business. Apparently unlike his father. Lula tried to revive the conversation. The neighborhood has maintained a lot of its character. Those oak trees. 60 years. The mature landscaping adds value, Eldon agreed, though the gutters need attention. And the front step has a developing crack. Every observation was a stab. My house wasn't a home, it was evidence of decay. I carved the turkey, heavy knife in hand. Each bite became a reminder. The food I had carefully prepared was being consumed by people auditing my failures. Dad always makes the best meals at parties, Agnes said, but her voice lacked conviction. Remember that Christmas stuffing, Mom? With chestnuts. Wonderful, Lula responded quickly. The details matter, Eldon chimed in, handing the salt to me, although sometimes it's more efficient to delegate. Professional cooking saves time for more important things, more important than a father cooking for his daughter. Agnes checked her phone, satisfied. All my parents together sharing a meal. All of their parents. The phrase cemented my degradation. Wine would complement this perfectly, Eldon added, inspecting his water glass with mild disapproval. Pinot Noir from Sonoma. Excellent bottle. I admitted I wasn't much of a wine drinker, but the gesture wasn't for me. It was ceremony, a subtle declaration of superiority. The conversation swirled around me, through me. Occasionally a nod or a laugh included me like a polite gesture to a museum artifact. Agnes spoke animatedly about her work, her plans, her bright future, supported by people who understood the modern marketplace. Dessert arrived. Coffee on a store-bought pastry from the freezer. I noticed my phone vibrate. Jerry's third call. Urgent, no doubt, but I couldn't leave. Not while Eldon cataloged my shortcomings with clinical relish. The coffee sounds perfect, Agnes declared, standing up to clear the plates. Dad, sit down. Mom and I will take care of cleaning up. Even the cleaning was being handled by others in my own house. I remained at the end of the table, Eldon leaning back in my chair, contemplating his conquered territory. Soon Agnes would remember the conversation about money we hadn't finished. Soon I would have to confess my failure to the man who had replaced me in everything that mattered. The cups remained empty. Agnes checked her watch again, satisfied. Let's stay a little longer. Let's make this a real family afternoon. One look between her and Eldon chilled my blood. This wasn't spontaneous hospitality. It was orchestrated. Timed for maximum effect. Eldon reached into his jacket pocket with deliberate ceremony. His fingers closed something. He pulled out a folded check, neat, formal, triumphant. Actually, Agnes, before we get too comfortable, I have something for you. He placed it on my table next to the coffee stain that was slowly spreading across the wood. Even upside down, I could read it, $100,000. Agnes, here's a check for $100,000 for your startup. Her gasp was genuine. Her hands flew to cover her mouth in surprise. She hadn't known anything about the game being played here. She hadn't coordinated this move with him, by hand. I can't believe... She jumped up from her chair, throwing herself into his arms, pressing her face against his shoulder. Thanks, Dad. You're a real father. A real father. The words hit harder than any physical slap. I looked at the check and my modest savings flickered. In my mind, like a neon sign of my inadequacy, $25,000. That was all he had scraped together with 5 years of careful budgeting and sacrifice. I have $25,000 in savings, the words escaped before I could stop them. Pathetic and shaky in the sudden silence, Agnes turned to me. The joy vanished from her face, replaced by something I'd never seen before. Pure contempt, years of pent-up disappointment boiling over. 25,000. He laughed, but there was no humor in it, that's it. That's what 33 years of parenthood gives you. I tried to explain. Banks, friends, antiques, but she was already moving toward me, intensity emanating from every step. You never loved me. The accusation hit like physical force. All these years I thought you cared about me, but you can't even do what Eldon does without a second thought. Agnes, darling, that's not... Eldon is my real father, she spat. He proves it every day while you sit in this sad little house counting pennies. The slap came before I could react. The sharp crack echoed through my dining room like a gunshot. Pain exploded in my cheek. A metallic taste filled my mouth as my tooth cut into my lip. The room held its breath. Lula gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Eldon froze, seemingly shocked that his actions had provoked violence. Agnes's chest heaved with righteous fury, her hand tingling from the impact. I sat, head turned, heat spreading across my face. The coffee cup tipped over as I shuddered, the brown liquid seeping into the growing stain on the tablecloth. A small, trivial detail in a moment that had just changed everything. Slowly, carefully, I wiped the blood from my lip. Red on white. Evidence of my daughter's final rejection. 33 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, school plays, graduations, all dismissed with a violent gesture, and yet, something changed inside me. The coup had been meant to destroy me, to prove my irrelevance. Instead, it set me free. Freed me to wield the last thing money couldn't buy. I stood slowly, regaining my full height despite the heat. Agnes remained defiant, confident of holding all the power. Eldon, still in my chair, felt the first flicker of unease. Lula stared at her daughter, horror dawning, finally seeing the cruelty behind the polished exterior. The check was forgotten on the table. Its zeros were now insignificant. It held something far more valuable than money. The truth that would undo everything Agnes thought she knew about love, family, and what it means to have a real father. I wiped my bloody lip with deliberate precision, each movement reclaiming the dignity stolen by that slap. The dining room waited, silent. "You're right, Agnes," I said, my voice firm despite the metallic taste in my mouth. "I'm not your real father." The words hung like smoke from an explosion. Agnes's defense faltered, confusion replacing anger. What do you mean?" I let the silence stretch on. I let understanding slowly dawn. 33 years of deception were about to crumble. We adopted you from the orphanage when you were 2 years old. His face paled. The hand that had struck me trembled on his chest. "That's not possible." "You're lying. Mom, tell him he's lying." Tears streamed down Lula's cheeks as she slowly shook her head. "That's true, darling. We wanted to tell you, but the years passed and the time never seemed right." Agnes's legs gave way. She reached blindly for the chair, missed, stumbled backward and crashed into the wall. The hollow echo of her body against the plaster filled the room. 20 years, he whispered, his voice breaking. All this time, I continued, with an engineer's precision guiding each word in this moment of supreme revelation. Your biological parents couldn't take care of you. Social services placed you with us for adoption. We loved you from the first moment we saw you, scared tiny, clutching a stuffed bunny that had seen better days. Eldon's smug expression had completely disappeared. He sat motionless in his chair, finally understanding that he had entered a family far more complex than he had imagined. For 33 years, I've been your father by choice, not by biology. My voice grew louder with each word. Every night I checked on you when you had nightmares about the place before us. Every scraped knee I bandaged. Every school play I attended. Every proud moment of your accomplishments. None of it was determined by blood. Agnes slid down the wall to sit on the dining room floor, her expensive clothes wrinkled, her hair carefully combed but messy. You chose me. Every day I knelt beside him, ignoring the ache in my knees. When you were 5, afraid of monsters under the bed. At 16, convinced the world was ending because Tommy Morrison didn't notice you. On your graduation day, calling me, crying with joy. Every day I chose to be your father. She looked up through tears that had replaced her previous fury. But Eldon, he gave me the money. Money? I gestured toward the forgotten check on the table. He gave you money. I gave you a life. A name, a family, an identity. I gave you 33 years of love to a child who wasn't mine by definition. Except for the ones who truly matter. Lula leaned closer, tears flowing freely. We thought about telling you so many times, especially after the divorce. But you were already dealing with family changes and we didn't want to add to the trauma. Eldon finally found his voice, but it lacked the authority he had before. I didn't know. Agnes never mentioned it. Because she didn't know, I said simply. No one outside this family knew, except for the lawyers and social workers bound by confidentiality. To the world, you were our biological daughter. Agnes raised her hand, trembling, to touch the red mark her slap had left on my cheek. You let me hit you. You let me call you a failure, say you weren't my real father, because you wanted me to understand the difference between true parenthood and a biological accident. I took her hand gently. Eldon became your mother's husband and won you as part of the package. I chose you before I even met you, without seeing you, just because you needed a family. The check rustled in the air conditioning, absurdly loud in our small circle of revelation. All of Eldon's money, all his displays of material superiority, meant nothing compared to 3 decades of chosen love. Agnes looked at me with new eyes, seeing for the first time the man who had fought to adopt her, loved without obligation, sacrificed, saved, worried, celebrated every milestone. I hit the man who saved me from the orphanage, he whispered, the weight of his actions finally settling on his shoulders. She remained on the dining room floor, sobs breaking the heavy silence. I knelt beside her, letting her process 33 years of her life through this new perspective. Lula stayed close, her instinct torn between maternal comfort and uncertainty. Even Eldon remained silent, his previous dominance completely deflated. Finally, Agnes raised her tear-stained face to mine. All those years. You never told me you weren't my blood, but you loved me anyway. You never stopped being my blood, I gently corrected. You became my blood from the moment I signed those adoption papers. Biology is just the starting point. Love is what makes family. He struggled to his knees, reaching up to touch the mark he'd left on my cheek with trembling fingers. Oh, God. What have I done? Forgive me, Dad. The word Dad sounded different now, loaded with understanding, not casual disdain. You loved me without knowing you weren't my blood, she continued, her voice breaking. You chose me when my real parents couldn't. You saved me from what would have happened if I had stayed in that system. I helped her to her feet, knees aching but heart lighter than it had been in years. You've always been my daughter. Agnes, always. He hugged me with desperate intensity, the embrace of someone who almost lost everything precious and is only now realizing its value. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I compared you to him, he continued, his voice muffled against my shoulder, as if money were love, as if providing was the same as caring. Over his shoulder I could see Eldon sitting motionless in my chair. The check lay on my desk, still visible but forgotten. All his wealth, all his displays of superiority, couldn't compete with the bond forged over 3 decades of chosen devotion. Can you forgive me? Agnes whispered against my shoulder. For hitting me? For saying terrible things? For not seeing what I really gave you? I murmured, smoothing her hair the way I did when I was little and scared. There's nothing to forgive. You're my daughter. That means loving you, even when you forget who we are to each other. Lula leaned closer, her own tears finally subsiding. We should have told you years ago. We were afraid it would change the way you saw us, the way you saw yourself. Agnes pulled away, looking between us. It does change things. It makes everything bigger, more meaningful. You didn't have to love me, but you did anyway. He turned to Eldon, who was examining the tablecloth with uncomfortable intensity. I'm sorry I put you in this position. I asked you both for money without realizing, without understanding what I was really asking for. Eldon nodded stiffly, clearly out of his element. The check's still yours if you want it. For the business. Agnes looked at the paper on the table, then back at me. I don't think I need it anymore. Not like that, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Maybe I need to start smaller. Build something for myself, instead of looking for shortcuts. Pride swelled in my chest. Not the desperate pride of a man proving his worth, but the quiet satisfaction of seeing someone you love make a wise decision. Your father would be proud of that decision, Lula said gently, and for the first time in 5 years he was clearly referring to me. The afternoon light had shifted through the windows, casting new shadows over the dining room, where so much had been broken and rebuilt. The coffee stain on the tablecloth would be permanent, I realized, but it would serve as a reminder of the day we were reunited. Agnes pulled away from our embrace, but kept her hand in mine. I know this won't fix everything right away. I have 33 years of taking your love for granted to make up for. We have time, I said simply. That's what family gives you. Time to make mistakes. And try again. Eldon cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should go. Give them some space to talk. Agnes nodded, then surprised me by turning to him with genuine kindness. Thank you for wanting to help with the business. and for showing me what I was really looking for in a father. I already had him. As they prepared to leave, Agnes hugged me once more, this time longer, without the desperate edge of before. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," she whispered. My real father. The house felt different after they left, not empty but peaceful. I cleaned up the coffee stain and put away the dishes, moving slowly and enjoying the silence. The check remained on the table where Eldon had left it, but somehow it seemed smaller, less meaningful. Tomorrow, Agnes would call, and we would begin the work of rebuilding what we had almost lost. But tonight I would sit in my chair, and remember the weight of my daughter's arms on me, and the sound of her calling me Daddy, with a new understanding of what that word truly meant.